Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Empowered with Gina podcast. Okay, here I am again with birds of a feather, empowered, strong, smart, brilliant women doing things on their own terms. Today we have Corissa Hernandez, a social entrepreneur, which is a title that she has made up brilliantly because it absolutely describes what she does. Hello, friend.
Hi, Gina. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
I'm so happy you said yes. Now you guys think I'm busy. Follow her page. We'll put the handle in the caption. She's busy. Okay. 3 adjectives to describe yourself.
Oh my gosh. Passionate, driven, and resilient.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
So my story is interesting. I grew up in La Puente, but
California.
La Puente, California. Everyone thinks I'm from Boyle Heights just because I'm so committed to the neighborhood and like everything that I do roots from Boyle Heights. But that's where my family's first home in the United States is from.
La Puente.
Yeah. Well, no, Boyle Heights.
Oh, Boyle Heights.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when I was born, they had already moved to La Puente.
Oh, okay. My family's from Boyle Heights too. So
cool.
Hence the connection.
Beautiful.
So you grow up in La Puente area. What was school like for you?
So school is interesting. I started in elementary at Sparks Elementary. It was like the local school. But then my mom and dad really wanted to open up an opportunity where I went to private school. So, you know, their hardworking immigrant parents had to make a ton of sacrifices to put me in a private school called St. Mark's in Hacienda Heights.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up going to St. Mark's. I absolutely loved it. I think that I was blessed with a principal who was like way ahead of her time. Like thinking back now, I remember her doing lessons around women in history that should be recognized and testing on
which wasn't talked about.
No, not at all. And not appreciated at that
At
age.
all.
You know, you're just kind of like, oh, another test. But you didn't realize the value in the lessons that she was providing. So from there, I ended up going to Bishop Amat High School in La Puente.
Yes.
And then I was one of the few young people that listens to their parents. Who was like, go to school, get an education. And then they would remind me about their story of like leaving everything they ever knew to come to this country to give us opportunities. So for me, it was important that their sacrifices didn't go in vain. And so I wanted to do, you know, that whole system of like, okay, I'm going to go to college now. Yeah. I didn't understand the differences of university. Like I didn't know what a community college was, a Cal State or
Really?
I did not. I mean, my parents were immigrant parents. So
And even though you went to private school, they didn't teach you that.
you know, they talked about it, but I feel like time got invested in like high performing students or lower performing students. But those of us that were kind of like in the middle, we just get overlooked.
They're like, they'll make it.
They'll figure it
out, which you did.
Yeah, which we did. But I wish somebody would have like invested a little more time in me because then I would have known, okay, I got to do XYZ to go straight to UCLA.
Got it.
But, you know, as you get older, you recognize like life's journey is going to take you where you need to be. And so I went to Cal Poly Pomona and it was the greatest thing that could have happened to me, honest to God. Yeah. So I studied sociology and Chicano studies.
Okay.
And so the professors that I had were very progressive professors. So it started this like awakening and becoming super conscious of like social issues, disparities that exist in our communities. And then for the first time, I was able to see my own history reflected in, you know, the history of the United States.
Which was never taught in mainstream school.
You know, sometimes you would hear about discrimination and then, you know, there's almost this shame about being a Mexican immigrant because you're like, well, I did come to this country and they should feel like upset about it. But then when I started learning about
that the border crossed us,
100%.
Nobody talks about that.
No. And then, you know, and then I started seeing like, oh, okay, the railroad system, that's what brought my great grandfather. Oh, you know, the student walkouts of the Chicano movement. My mom was at that high school, the Vietnam War, and how they drafted brown and black young folks right out of college with very little experience. That was my dad. And so then I start becoming passionate about like, why aren't we being told these stories? Like there's a sense of empowerment and knowing that you belong.
Absolutely.
And that we're being kind of kept from resources to advance ourselves. So I credit a lot of that to Cal Poly Pomona. And I had one of my biggest like life-changing moments, I think. And I feel terrible because I'll never remember the professor's name. And I should give him so much credit. But I remember one of my first classes was one of those big auditoriums. And then you just feel like you're lost in the crowd. No one really notices you. And so I had to turn in my first homework assignment. So I like dig around my backpacks. Back then we still submitted papers. It wasn't like
I remember
email.
that.
So my paper's like a little wrinkled. So I'm like ironing it out with my forearm. Then I realized I didn't have my name on it. So I like scribble it on. And I walk up to the front and I give it to the professor. And I remember he looked at me so deeply and he just like shook his head at me. Like, he's like, I need you to understand one thing right now and moving forward. You no longer represent just yourself. You represent an entire community.
Oh my gosh.
I swear, Gina, it was that moment where it was just like, oh my God. And from that moment forward, I performed to that level where I'm like walking into spaces like, number one, I shouldn't be the only one representing my community, but there's a lot of work to be done. So for me, it was really important. Like when I show up, I show up. And we're going to make some noise. I'm going to make sure we're paving a way so that we're all here together.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you see why she's my friend? Hello. Okay, so you're at Cal Poly Pomona.
Yeah.
And then where does that lead you?
So, I'm becoming this activist. I'm really involved on campus. I did a summer internship with the UCLA Labor Center, where I got placed with Justice for Janitors, which is a labor union. And it happened to be one of the most historical moments of that union where they were just really going hard. I was mentored by some of the best labor union organizers. And so my passion for wanting to be involved in community organizing was really sparked. And I was like, I want to work in community organizing at some capacity. And so at that time, I learned about an organization called Inner City Struggle, which still exists in Boyle Heights. And they're structured around like educational justice on the east side. So I was like, you know what? I want to apply there. And I felt like, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. I'm a star student, an activist, community involved. And I didn't get the job.
No.
I didn't. So like I was devastated, and job after job I would not get. So I ended up working at Macy's.
Stop.
I was so like devastated. Like, how did this happen? I mean, nothing wrong with working at Macy's.
No,
but
but
I had to do what I had to do.
And you were so involved.
Totally. So I was like, you know what? They don't know me. That's why they didn't hire. They didn't know me. So one day I just sat in front of the computer, worked on my resume, and I dressed up like I actually had an interview. And I drove myself to MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. Because at that point I was like, I don't know if I want to work with youth or if I want to go into law. Like something's telling me to follow one of these paths. So I was like, I'm going to go to MALDEF and I'm going to show up like I have an interview. So sure enough, I walked in, I had my resume, and they're like, who are you here to see? I'm like, whoever will give me an interview. And they're like, it doesn't work like that. So I started talking to them, and they're like, you know what? We like you. We could give you an internship. I'll take it. I'll take it. Because I wanted them to see my work ethic, what I was about, my passion. I felt like if they saw it, then they would recognize it.
Okay.
Long story short, I didn't get any job because there was no position there, but they referred me to an organization called Impacto, which is in Boyle Heights, still in Boyle Heights.
Yeah.
And that was like my first official job working with youth in an anti-gang program. And so I learned that I love working with kids and decided to pursue a master's in education at UCLA. And so I ended up going to UCLA to become a teacher.
But you're not a teacher. Well, you kind of are, but you're not.
It's like, yeah, it's so interesting. Again, it's just like surrendering to life's journeys. Like my mom once told me when I was working at Macy's, I was like so sad one night. She's like, listen, life's a puzzle. Like the pieces are just going to be placed there. You're not going to see the full picture, but you have to trust. You have to trust that God has this plan for you, and you just have to go through the flow. I don't know why that like stuck with me. Like, okay, so let me just I'm where I'm supposed to be.
That's it.
I'm where I'm supposed to be. Yeah.
Okay. So UCLA, now what?
So I ended up teaching at Belvedere Middle School. Again, I had loved working with the kids.
While you're at UCLA?
It's interesting how it starts. Like first year is all theory and then second year is like practice because it's like a master's program too. So second year we're like actually teaching, but not our own class. We're like with a mentor teacher. And so then I get placed the next year on my own at Belvedere Middle School. I start teaching. I love it. I'm still friends with a lot of the students who are doing amazing things out there too, by the way. But something life-changing happened there too. And that's my dad decided he was going to retire. I think in his eyes, he saw like, oh, my job as a dad has been fulfilled. My kids are in college. This one's starting a career. I'm done. Okay. So for me, it was like a proud moment because I saw my dad work his, off.
Sure.
And
what did he do?
He was the service director at Chevrolet.
Okay. And
so, day in, day out would go to work, proud family man, party boy, church boy.
Yeah. Like all of it. Well-rounded.
Yeah. I loved it. He was my hero. And so it was hard for me to understand how someone who worked 30 plus years for their corporation, built their business, would then retire with nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, I was like, wait, none of this makes sense. Like, how is it that someone works and then there's nothing in the end?
Yeah.
But he was led to believe, like a lot of folks in our community, that Social Security is how you retire in this country. And so for me, being brand new in my career, looking at, this is where I'm going to retire. I want to make sure I understand how money works. Like, why did this happen to him? How do I prepare myself? What is my pension and what are my options? So I started like teaching myself, like, okay. And then it intrigued me so much, just like the dynamics of money, how it works, how it grows, how you invest it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get licensed because then I'll manage my own accounts. That was it. Like, I didn't think anything beyond that. I want to manage my own accounts. And so as I was studying for my test on my lunch breaks, my nutrition breaks, the other teachers are like, hey, I heard you're studying for, to learn about how to invest. Can you look at my statements?
Wow.
And so then I started finding out that this wasn't an isolated, situation that I had found myself in. It's like a community-wide, whether it's just women or people of color or Spanish-speaking people. And so that's when I was like, you know what? Let me help them and see where this leads to. Yeah. And before you knew it, I had a little business on my hands that I had no intentions of. And so I had to figure out, okay, how do I still teach and then do this? And then I had to make the really hard decision about jumping ship. So I reflected on it. I prayed on it. I'm very faith driven. So I feel like I got the signs that I needed, where there are a lot of good teachers doing a lot of good work for our community, but there is so little representation in the financial industry talking to our communities and even our level, women with degrees and careers and income, but we're still being overlooked because there's this disconnect between the financial industry and our community.
Absolutely.
And so that's what led me to my first business, which we opened 18 years ago, which is a financial brokerage firm. And we do a lot of financial literacy in the community.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And if anyone follows me out there, you know that my biggest jam in life is financial literacy, because education and knowledge is the greatest equalizer. And our communities intentionally have been kept, the wealth tactics and strategies in education has been kept from our communities intentionally to keep us dependent on these systems.
100%.
To keep us worker bees, to keep us dependent, to keep us, not powerful and not wealthy. And so the fact that you did that and you ended up coming to that your own conclusion and creating a business out of it.
Yeah.
I just applaud you. And I thank you so much, because I know how needed that conversation is, and that you started it 18 years ago. So I can imagine you've seen the transition, but as you know, it's still very much needed.
Oh my gosh.
There's 100%. Nothing out there.
And it's like you said, I have women come up to me after workshops all the time, like, oh, thank you for bringing this. I've been looking for it everywhere and I can't find it. And I tell them, look, it's intentional.
Yes.
I think I saw statistics the other day that shows that the wealth within the Latina community, and I'm talking about only Latinas, as of 2023 is $2 trillion. Like, think about the capacity of the power that we hold with that type of money.
Yes.
But yet, if you ask your average Latina how they feel about their financial literacy,
What?
no.
I have a bank account. I have a savings account. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So, like, going back to the intentional disconnect, imagine the changes we can make with understanding how to manage $2 trillion.
Absolutely.
The conscious investments that we make,
Absolutely.
the conscious spending that we do, the
Absolutely.
investment in Latina-owned brands, just like the power that we hold. So now more than ever, I feel like it's just like it's
Right.
go time. We're opening businesses at a faster rate than any other demographic.
So good.
What can we do if we have this money and teach each other how to use it properly?
Absolutely. And I think a key to what you said is, yes, you're not going to have a lot, maybe many women they're going to be a lot starting businesses, but a lot are going into the workforce themselves, maybe not starting businesses.
Yeah.
But what Corissa said was our purchasing power. And what that means is we decide what products come in our home, what we buy on the shelves. When you walk into Target, are you going into Target or are you going to the mom and pop shop? Are you going to buy your dress at this place, at Amazon, online, big box? Or are you going to support the local intentional purchasing? And that's the power she's talking about. So yeah, we might not have $1 trillion ourselves, but our purchasing power, and we are so powerful in that, down to the food that comes in our home, the products that go on our body, our kids' body, so that's what she means by that.
100%. Thank you for clarifying.
It's okay.
I use these terms so frequently that we don't.
Right. And people don't, and a lot of women listening don't realize that that's the power they do hold. Your dollar, it's not just, I need to go get groceries. You have the power to intentionally decide, are you going to buy the, this or the other? And you taking the time to educate yourself about who owns this brand. Where's this money going? Is it like, Kroger's?
Yeah.
Or is it something maybe healthier for us? Anyway, so that's just a side note. That's what that means. So please be more intentional about what we're shopping for and buying and where it's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
So you start the brokerage company.
Yeah. So that
with your husband.
With my husband. So
when did you get married?
We were actually dating at the time, but like I just felt so passionate about it that I didn't think twice. Like this needs to exist. You. Yeah. Well, we opened it together. He had more an entrepreneur background than I did. So it just was it was a beautiful like partnership. Yeah. And so we opened it. We started training other financial representatives on how to get out there and do the same thing so that we can reach a larger audience because it's necessary information.
Yes.
And then as we were doing that, we were just kind of like, oh, it would be really cool. Financial services could be so black and white. I mean, I love it, but it's just like, it could be like redundant after a while. And so on the weekends, we used to love like craft beer, craft cocktails, like traveling to check out like the latest and greatest brewery or like, let's check out these cocktails. And so we're like, oh, what would be really cool is if we opened our own bar one day. And so that idea like kicked in and we're just like, then, one thing about us is that when we get focused on something, it's like, okay, we're going to make this happen one way or another. And even then, we had financial backgrounds, right? But what we didn't have is, wealthy parents or a rich aunt and uncle who could tell us, do it this way, don't do it that way. So at that point, we had managed to like save money, purchase properties, we were doing our thing. But because we didn't understand how to fund a small business, we decided to liquidate our own assets.
Ooh.
And so it's like a hard lesson learned, right? And it's just kind of those things where you're like, I wish somebody would have told me.
So for people listening, why is liquidating your asset to fund your new business not the best idea?
Because there's so many other creative routes to go. There's there's small business loans that you could get through the SBA that have favorable terms and lower interest rates that you can go after.
What if somebody says, oh no, but I don't want to have loans to pay back?
Okay.
That thing.
Great question. Then there's also going the investor route, presenting to investors who are interested in your type of business. They don't have the time to do it, but they see your qualities and your ability to open and run a business successfully. Then they may want to fund your business. So there's that option. And then grants. Grants are free money. but nobody talks about the grant opportunity. And sometimes some of our community is intimidated by the entire process, but it's just demystifying it and how simple it is to have access to grants. You know, over the years, I mean, I've owned 5 businesses. And I've been able to pull, I think I did the math not too long ago, about $425,000 in grant money.
Which is not a loan.
It's not a loan. This is free money that's being given out. But I know how to, I mean, I've done my time as an entrepreneur, so I've learned how to like look for these things.
Interesting.
And how to apply for them and then reduce the time and how to tell a compelling story. And, you know, all of that matters. So,
and it's so interesting because when we hear the word grant, the lay people, we think it's education. We think it's scholarship.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not in school. They're not going to give me a grant. I'm not in research. You don't have to. Like she's telling you, this is very important. These are gems of information, people.
Yeah.
Please listen.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you learned the lesson the hard way.
Yes. So we learned the lesson the hard way. And I mean, in the end, I have to be grateful that I even had, you know, the resources to open my first bar because it led to 4 more bars, you know? So we had these bars. We learned about, you know, craft beer, craft cocktails, how to brand, how to market. It was like crash coursing everything, right? We're just that kind of person.
How wonderful.
Where it's like, we'll figure it out. And I think that has a lot to do with that immigrant spirit. You know, you're resilient. You don't have a lot of resources, but you got a dream.
Figure it out.
And you're going to make it happen one way or another. So, and we did, you know, we surrounded ourselves by people who did know what they were doing and created teams that I credit a lot of our success to. And so, you know, things are going well and the pandemic hits.
Oh, shit. Okay, wait. So you open a bar, one bar.
So first bar was in 2018.
Okay, where was that?
I might be wrong on that. No, 2015.
2015.
I'm so sorry. 2015 in Eagle Rock.
Okay.
And it was a craft beer bar. It was a cool concept. You'd walk in and it was like specialty beer and wine. So walk in, it's a bottle shop. And there are like 600 different beers. Whoa. You could either buy them to go or you walk to the very back. It's a small, like laid back bar and we'd open it up, pour it in a glass and you can just hang out there. Oh. Yeah. So the concept took off and a lot of people were so intrigued by it that they were like, whatever you do on your next one, I want in.
Yeah.
Whatever you do on your next one, I want in. Cause they were just like, this is the thing. When you think no one's watching,
they're watching.
Everyone's watching. They see your work ethic. They see your passion. They see your results. And so eventually we started saying, you know what, we should be writing like some of these names down and their contact information. Because if we do open something else, then we should approach them. And sure enough, another opportunity came up 2 years later in Burbank. And that one was called the Empire Tavern. Mm-hmm. And one of our managers at the first bar was like, oh, I want to own my own bar someday. So we gave him first right of refusal. Yeah. So we approached them and we're like, hey, we have this opportunity. We want to approach you first. If you're interested, XYZ, this is what it breaks down to. And sure enough, he wanted to move forward with it. So we opened that bar together. Wow.
At the same time. So you have 2 bars now.
So now we had 2 bars.
Okay. And then
2 years later, we started talking a little bit about, oh, you know, it'd be really neat to open something in Boyle Heights. Like I've always wanted to go back to the community, create some type of space. Why not a bar? And so it's funny because there was an article that had come out in the LA Times at that time about gentrification, right?
Yeah.
And so they had interviewed somebody from a bar on the block in Boyle Heights. Mm-hmm. And that bar was a location I really wanted. So I went to Facebook and I was like, interesting article, check it out. But does anyone know the landlord at XYZ bar?
Gosh.
And somebody said yes.
Stop. See? All you have to do is ask.
Manifest.
All you have to do is ask.
Manifest. We're like brujitas.
Stop.
Yes. So I was like, please, can you make an introduction? I really want to pitch an idea that I have for this space. So sure enough, he came to our bar in Eagle Rock. We had a meeting. And so he's like, well, I don't have the space available. That one's leased out, but we'll stay in contact. So I was like, oh,
bummer.
Like maybe a few months later, he reaches back out and he's like, that one's not available, but the one across the street is.
Okay.
I was like,
I'll take it.
Immediately, yes.
I'll take it.
And so that's how Chelas was born.
Okay.
And that one's probably my favorite project that we've ever had in terms of the bar world.
Why?
It just felt like I was back home.
Okay.
You know, it's Boyle Heights.
Yeah.
It's a community that had given so much to my family
Absolutely.
that it was almost that opportunity to say thank you.
Yes.
Like, thank you. This is for you. And so we were really intentional about everything we brought into the space.
Oh.
Like, we went to Guanajuato, where my family's from,
Mm-hmm.
to see what the bar world looked like out there, because we wanted it to be intentional again. Like,
Absolutely.
okay, our family's from Guanajuato. We're going to bring that element to Boyle Heights. So we purchased all our tiles from Mexico. The furniture was custom made from Mexico. We brought that in.
Beautiful.
And then we really wanted that element from Boyle Heights in the space. So Fabian Deborah, who's
Mhm.
the art director at Homeboy Industries, is a good friend. And he had already done the mural outside. So I was like, well, how cool would it be for it to like have the veins of that mural run through the space of Chelas? So he came in and brought in that Boyle Heights element where all the murals inside were from somebody local. And so the community really rallied around it, and it became a community staple.
How beautiful.
And, you know, it's the bar I love the most.
Yeah.
We'll get to what happened with it after the pandemic. But my husband was so inspired with, you know, a bar in Boyle Heights and the community that I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, we should do one in Highland Park. So then we were like, okay, cool. Yeah, if the opportunity comes up, let's do it in Highland Park. Because, you know, with Highland Park, if you're not familiar with Highland Park, it's a quickly gentrifying neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's where my husband was born and raised. If you're familiar with the history of Highland Park, the 90s, it was the most dangerous city in the United States.
Jesus.
Like, literally. And so to see it changing, but not be inclusive of the folks that went through the good, the bad, you know, the ugly, it's unfair, right?
Sure.
So it was really important for us to create a space that paid homage to the original Highland Park, while also welcoming folks who want to learn about the culture and embrace it and feel a part of it too. So it was funny because my husband's brother-in-law, his sister's husband, called us like at 3 a.m. He'd been out drinking with some friends. And so my husband answered thinking something was wrong. He's like, Gabe, I just talked to somebody who knows the owners at the bar that it was before. They're selling.
No.
Like, call them. Yeah.
Here you go again.
And luckily we had met them. I'm big on networking. Like,
so
I'm
powerful.
out there meeting everyone anyway, my husband too. So it just so happened we had met the owners at one point months before.
Yes.
So we did have their number. So we made the call. Sure enough, they're like, okay, before we go public with it, we'll negotiate something with you.
And so that's nativo.
That's nativo. And that's
Then the
how nativo-
pandemic.
Oh.
And then the pandemic. So
I still
at
have
this
PTSD.
point, I know.
It's awful.
At this point, you have 4 bars and your brokerage company still going. So you're
Still
doing
going.
both.
Yeah.
Okay. So
All of the above.
everything's rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
So during the day, you're doing
Yeah.
financial advising, investing, etc. At night,
Yeah.
fiesta.
Yeah.
At 4 bars, and everything's full throttle.
So
and then
pre-pandemic, luckily, we had decided to sell the first bar because
Okay.
we did need a little more capital for Nativo.
Okay.
So we sold the first bar and we walked away happy. There was an exit strategy. You want to sell your business, you should. So at the time the pandemic hit, we had 3 bars in my financial firm. And it was one of those moments where it felt like the Twilight Zone. I'm sure for everyone, right? You're just kind of like, what's happening? So many layers. But in terms of like shutdowns, we were amongst the first to have to experience a shutdown. And I kid you not, it happened on a Sunday. I'll never forget. I was laying down resting, watching the news, and then I heard Garcetti come on. And he was like, oh, and bars have to shut down by midnight tonight.
So you just heard it on the news at home.
Like that. And I'm like, wait, what? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, what does this mean? So I started texting a few other friends of mine who own bars. Like, did you hear this? Like, what does this mean? And we're all like trying to figure it out.
This is terrible.
It was awful. Awful.
Oh, scary.
So we called the team. We tell everyone, like, let's get together. Like, we don't know what's happening. Your team's looking at you for guidance. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. So we wrote everyone their checks and like, hey, this should only be 2 weeks. Because that's what we were being told.
Oh my God.
Long story short, we went through 4 shutdowns. And what people didn't recognize is that when you run a business, it's not about like shutting down and reopening, like, hey, everyone come back in. It's like people start losing faith in the industry. They're scared. You know, we're like with little shielded face masks in the middle of a pandemic. You know, my team's like, am I really safe under here? You know what I mean? So it's like, now I'm trying to keep my business alive. Be strong, a strong leader for my team, be present for my family, and then also like take care of my own mental health. And so,
and then you have the brokerage firm.
And yes. And so it was an incredibly challenging time. And I, at times, was just like, what did I do? Like, why am I here? How are we going to get out of this? So Nativo actually opened November of 2020, which was never the intention because we had bought it right before the pandemic.
Okay.
And we try to pull out and they're like, we can pull out, but you lose your deposit.
Oh, shoot.
We're not in that type of position to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can't lose deposit.
It was a sizable deposit. Yeah. If it were like, whatever, my mental health is worth more, but
sure.
No. So we would have opened sooner. It was just like trying to figure out pandemic with two bars and one about to birth. So it's like, how do we get through all this? So November comes, we open, and 9 days into it, they issue a mandatory shutdown. I had all my inventory, I had payroll, I had staff, I had everything. It was at that point where I was like, this is it. This is as far as we come. We got to feel good about it. Like,
we're done. We're done. There's no way to survive this.
Yeah.
Because you weren't in an industry that could quickly pivot and set up outside, like maybe not as easily because everyone was so freaking scared at that point.
Yeah, well, even if you had a patio at that point, when the city issued shutdowns, everything was shut down.
So you couldn't even...
You could do to go, but what people didn't realize is that independent restaurants and bars, we're not built to like be on a to-go service only.
That's not your
like our strategy. Overhead is way larger than to be like, oh sure, take this 12-ounce cocktail and we'll be good. It's like we need people in there, and no one's going to want to pay the 12-ounce cocktail to drink in their living room the way they would with someone serving it to them. The ambiance in a patio, so it just changed the concept of everything, and it was an incredibly challenging time. And what like reignited in me was just that activist spirit, because I started recognizing the disparities that were existing in terms of like who's accessing the resources to keep their businesses alive. Who was labeled the business, what were they called?
Essential workers.
Who was labeled an essential business that could stay open.
You should have been an essential business.
And we were looking at like, Targets and Walmarts not following the rules. They weren't following the rules, while small businesses were doing everything in their power to implement the rules so we could keep our doors open. And then even being in Boyle Heights, I'm blessed and privileged to have an educational background. So I know how to be resourceful. Like I can go on a computer and look.
Yes.
How do I find, rescue resources or grants? But, the women who've been there 25 years with their business don't speak the language, don't understand technology. Who is coming to tell them? So that's where this advocacy sparked, where it's like, okay, we're small business owners. And a lot of time, this is the livelihood of our community. Like we're not just providing stimulation to the local economy and jobs. Like we're a symbol of hope for a lot of people. Like this is something I see in myself reflected in. I want to see them survive because then it motivates me and inspires me.
Yes.
So I took on advocacy to another level where I started getting involved like in civil engagement, becoming friends with my local leaders so that they could become aware of what was happening in our communities. And then I took it a step further to start mentoring small business owners. And so that's where that platform came from. It's just like, hey, you want to open a business? Learn from my mistakes. I wish I would have had somebody who is like, hey, been there, done that, do this, don't do that.
Yes.
And so I started a consulting firm for small businesses.
Okay, so right when you're like, I'm at a dead end, the world has closed, literally. We can't go any further. You could have collapsed literally and just been, woe is me.
Yeah.
Life isn't fair. This sucks. I hate everything. But what you did, again, with that spirit, you pivoted in your own way and you actually created another business without knowing, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think you intended to do
No,
it.
it wasn't intentional. It was just that love that I have for my community. Like, I want to see us all come out on the other end, you know, and I know what it's like to be there, you know, especially right now as you're trying to open a business in the economic environment that we're in.
Yes.
You can't afford to make one wrong move.
And you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
No one's educating small business owners.
Exactly. So it's like, how do we take these years of experience and really help pave a way in a way that's like deeper than, look at, I did it, you could do it too. Yes. It's like, no, like this is steps 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
And then make sure you're also implementing these other things. Don't scale too fast.
Right.
Don't grow too fast.
Don't liquidate your personal assets.
Don't liquidate your personal assets.
Rule number 1. But who would know that? Because we were taught you don't want to have loans. You don't want to owe. You don't want to owe. So it makes logical sense that someone would do that. Like you did. You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
That's not how we grow wealth. That's not how you start business. You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Catch me up to today. Now, where's everything?
So we had to close Chelas a year ago. There was a falling out with the landlord. Okay. There's like some legalities we had to go through. So there's only so much I can say about it. But I learned a lot about lease agreements and what you should look for and what to be careful. You know, what are the red flags?
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize I would get as depressed as I did having to close something because it became a staple of the community. Yeah. You know, and it was really passionate. It wasn't just a bar. It was
a passion project.
It was like a safe haven. It's a place where people felt seen that are generally overlooked. We not only hosted fundraisers for local nonprofits, perreo nights, but also political meet and greets so that you could get to know everybody.
Yeah,
it was just a hub.
Yeah.
So it hurt bad. And as that happened, I got bad news about my own health. So that's a whole other journey. I've struggled for years with like fibroids and cysts and like female reproductive health, which is a whole other topic.
Girl, we could talk about that too.
About health. Especially for women of color in this country. So I was notified that I was going to have an emergency hysterectomy.
While you're going through the Chela shutdown.
Going through this. So now again, I feel like I've just been kicked and punched and like slammed to the ground. And so again, you surrender to life's journey. You're just like, that's it. There's a reason.
Sure is.
Why I have to do this. And when I was going through it, I cried a lot.
Of course.
I didn't recognize signs of depression. I didn't. But then it came a point where I recognized like I need professional help. Like I need to talk to someone.
Good for you.
Brought on a therapist and it was life-changing.
The best thing.
I credit my therapist for so much of my growth during that time. But then it all started making sense. You know, it slowed me down during a time that I really just needed to sit still and reflect on what has happened. I forgot to mention, and I don't know how I forgot to mention it because it's so huge. But as we were going through all these shutdowns, my dad passed away. And he was like my best friend, you know? So it was just kind of like, so it gave me time to like kind of digest that. You know, like, okay, there's a lot of grieving that I wasn't allowed the time to grieve because I was looking out for everything else and everyone else except myself. So process that and then just reflect on, okay, feel good about what you've done. Feel good. You did it.
Yes.
And you did it well.
Yes.
Now, what can you do with that wealth of knowledge? And so I started fine tuning. You know, I'm going to get back in the community around financial literacy. Like That's always been my passion. It's necessary more now than ever.
Yeah.
And included in that platform is also raising awareness on small businesses. Like, okay, what do we need to do to get it up and running, but also advocate, because at this point in time, you can't just run a business. You become an advocate for
you have
the
to
survival of your business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and your community's businesses.
Okay, so I just feel I'm so proud of you, just what you've come through, because there is the business part of it and navigating that, but then, and I know we haven't even touched on health and personal life and all that stuff, but there's that layer too. There's family, there's community, and there's you truly, and I know it, goes back to that teacher telling you that you represent the community. But really you are absolutely doing that. Yeah. You are absolutely the perfect representative for the community, doing what you're doing, that get up and go spirit, the can do spirit, the I'm not a victim spirit, whatever, literally getting shut down. Yeah. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to make another business. I'm going to keep going, always reinvesting in our community. So I applaud you, and I love this so much. And I'm just so intrigued by you. So how can people who might want to get small business consulting or work with your financial or your brokerage company, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm very active on Instagram. It's at Corissa Hernandez. And then I have a website that's also corissahernandez.com.
Okay. And we'll spell everything out and put it in the caption. And then how can we visit you at your bars?
Oh my gosh, yes. I would love for everyone to come visit us at Nativo. We're in Highland Park. Okay. We're known for our mezcal and tequila program, but we also have incredible mocktails. I know some of our healthy folks out there.
Yes, so good. I appreciate that.
100%, because I always hated going to bars and asking for like a virgin pina colada. Yeah. No, we make them to where it's a 0 proof brand that tastes like tequila, but 0 alcohol. It's a beautiful cocktail with the same garnishes, so nobody will have to know.
You guys, they'll never know. They'll never know. Well, and it's amazing because my husband, Mike, he doesn't drink. And so I do. I enjoy. But so it's perfect for both of us.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, my friend, thank you. I'm so inspired by you. And I'd love to have you back to talk more specifically about just every part of what you're doing, because there's still so much conversation.
Thank you for this platform. It's so important.
All boats rise together.
Amplifying stories.
We're doing it together.
Amen.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.